Good morning, friends and presenters and attendees. My name is Janine Hooks, and it is my pleasure to bring you another resource and information-rich programming from your Columbus Urban League Minority Business Assistance Center. As you know, we frequently, throughout the course of the month, will bring you new and interesting and much needed information to help you excel and grow in your business. We ask that you continue to look to us in all of our channels across our website, our social media, as well as our weekly newsletter called the We Care blog for other types of information that we'll be presenting through the course of the month and the rest of the calendar year. So without further ado, what I want to do is introduce Janae Stevens, which is presenting, and her team that's presenting the Vorys V.I.B.E program. And it's really just an informational session to make us all aware of some of the resources that are available to us as business owners and the types of legal information we may need to tap into. So without further ado, I'm going to let Janae kind of talk about Vorys V.I.B.E program, who she is, where she came from, and then she will introduce her team members. Take it away, Janae.
Perfect. Good morning. Thank you, Janine, for the great introduction. And the team members that are here from Vorys, if you don't mind, if you want to come off of your video or come on your video so folks can see who we are. My name is Janay Stevens, and I am an attorney at the Vorys law firm in Columbus, Ohio. I am one of the folks at the law firm who is leading what we call the Vorys Initiative for Business Empowerment, or V.I.B.E for short. You see a few of my colleagues, Bruce, Jeff, Matthew, and Jabari on screen here with me today. They are also critical or crucial team members as well. They're helping coordinate this work. The V.I.B.E program really came out of a desire to do more and to be able to use our legal expertise to commit to the communities where we live and work. So actually on the call here, we all, aside from Bruce and I, who are both in the Columbus office, we're scattered around Ohio. And so as I introduce the team members, they can tell you a little bit about themselves. Me personally, I am an employment lawyer, so I work with businesses to help them manage their employees. From a day-to-day standpoint, that could be helping with discipline or helping with just general leave issues, as you can imagine, with COVID, trying to figure out how to get people into work and out of work, anything that an employer might face on a day-to-day basis. So I will go around now and ask my colleagues to introduce themselves, give a brief background. And Jeff, you're up first.
Good morning, everybody. I'm Jeffrey Fickus. I work out of our Cleveland office, actually. I spent a lot of years living in and working and going to school in Columbus. I'm a proud graduate of the Fisher College of Business and the Moritz College of Law there. And I'm a corporate attorney, which means I work with entrepreneurs who are forming entities, capitalizing business entities with debt and equity, and doing material make or break transactions, whether they're acquiring other companies, entering into strategically important commercial agreements with third parties, or doing joint ventures with other organizations. And it's my pleasure to be here today. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Jeff. How about you, Bruce?
Great. Good morning, and thanks for having us. I'm Bruce Page. I'm a corporate partner in Columbus. My practice is very similar to Jeff's. I chair our mergers and acquisitions group. So I spend a lot of time working on mergers and acquisitions of both privately held and publicly traded companies. In addition to that, have an opportunity to work almost daily with folks forming entities, growing those entities, and ultimately sometimes selling those entities. In terms of other areas of expertise, I work a lot with universities and community colleges in the state in helping them and some of their affiliated entities with commercial agreements and other matters that they have. Personally, I am very involved with Big Brothers Big Sisters. I've been a mentor for about 15 years and I'm vice chair of the board. So really enjoy working with kids and helping serve the community in that way as well.
Thanks, Bruce. How about you, Jabari?
Good morning, everyone. My name is Jabari Shaw. I'm an associate in the Cincinnati office. I'm in what is called our e-control group, which technically means I'm a brand protection attorney that focuses on protecting our clients' brands on the internet. I also work in our antitrust group. So I help our clients make decisions on pricing and really help them focus on making sure that they don't run afoul of any of the antitrust laws that are set up in the country.
Thanks, Jabari. And last but certainly not least, Matthew.
Thanks, Janae. Hello, everybody. My name is Matthew Carpenter. I spent some time in Columbus as a law student at the Morris College of Law and also as a judicial law clerk in the Southern District of Ohio. I am now an associate in the Vorys Cleveland office. My practice there primarily focuses on litigation, meaning that I primarily help clients navigate the lawsuit process. As has been mentioned, I have extensive experience working with youth, particularly through community service endeavors and then other professional engagements along the way. So happy to be here and super excited for what we're going to be able to accomplish together.
Well, thanks, Matthew. And just to give the folks in attendance and those that are going to be watching maybe after the program today, a little bit of background about what we do at the V.I.B.E program. So the V.I.B.E program in its simplest form is designed to help both emerging or new or existing minority-owned businesses with a foundational legal project. Maybe it's the legal project that you've put on the back burner for one reason or another. And the idea is to help folks work through that project and do it at a complimentary rate for a project that we agree on as the law firm and the client. Some of those foundational projects, just to give a few examples so that there's some context, is helping folks set up their LLC, get an operating agreement in place, maybe doing some basic commercial contracting or contract drafting. We've done some employment agreements, employee handbooks, offer letters, things of that nature. There are just a few things to keep in mind that we cannot do. And I think it's really important to set those expectations at the outset. So the things that we cannot or don't yet do as part of the program would be any sort of litigation. So if there is a case or a matter where you think you're ultimately going to have to sue someone, that is not something that we would take on as part of the V.I.B.E program. We also do not have the capability at this time to take on estate planning or probate type work that you might need for your business planning purposes. So those would be really the two major exceptions that we know at the outset we cannot take on. But anything else that is foundational, it gets you over a hump, it gets you maybe through a bumpy patch or something that you need some assistance with, and that's what we're looking to accomplish with the V.I.B.E program. Janine, I will pause there because I know you came ready with some questions. Oh, you are on mute.
I'm on mute. Yep. Thank you for that. Number one, I just want to thank everyone for giving us your time today and for really being committed to assisting minority and disadvantaged businesses with this type of a resource. It's so very important. In our course of work, we talk about the elements that you need when you're starting your business. And many times there's frustration, concern, and hesitancy when it comes to seeking out the financial pieces that you need to really have a strong business foundation and the legal pieces that you need to have a good, strong business foundation. So here's one of my first questions. In a perfect world, and this is an easy pitch for you guys, in a perfect world, and I'd love to hear from each one of you from your different disciplines, when would you recommend that an entrepreneur get involved with some sort of legal resource?
I'm happy to jump in first. I think that there are probably some specific times that I'm sure Jeff and Bruce in particular, given their corporate background, would identify for us. But I think the earlier the better, and the sooner you find someone you trust, that would be the moment for me. Is I think as you are developing and thinking about a business, you're thinking about your team and who's going to be on that team. Who do you trust to give you good, sound counsel? both as really as a professional. And so I don't think you can ever start too early in building that relationship. Even if there is not a project that you need done, knowing that you have someone to turn to at the point at which you decide you need one is better than having to search when it's too late. So I think just building that relationship, even if there's not a project that you need completed, will make you feel a lot more confident at the point in which you're going to a lawyer or even a financial advisor. I mean, that's a big trust decision, and you've got to trust that person. So I think that the sooner you can develop that relationship, the better.
What say ye?
So this is Bruce. Just to follow up on Janae's point, I couldn't agree more. I think sooner rather than later, largely to establish a relationship, a comfort level with whoever your counsel is. A lot of times the perception is you want to hold off contacting counsel because it's going to cost money to do so. The reality is, I think most attorneys would be willing to have an initial conference or two, and this is separate, obviously from the way we've structured the V.I.B.E program, but just to get to know what the needs of the prospective client are, better understand what they want to accomplish. And sometimes we can point to free resources, or maybe we're not the best resource. So we get a lot of questions that may be more appropriate for accountants or insurance advisors. The other thing that we have access to that I think is helpful, especially to the extent that folks reach out to us early, we have a lot of questionnaires and forms that may be appropriate to elicit information that can help someone get to the point where they are ready to use legal counsel. They can take some of these questionnaires or the information and really put some thought into where they are in the process, and then reach back out when they have a lot of the relevant information. And then it's more efficient for the attorney to help them with forming the entity or whatever it may be. So again, early on is usually the best case scenario. And hopefully, if nothing else, just establishing a relationship, providing certain resources that may be available, as well as questions to help direct the process.
Awesome.
I would chime in to parrot that, and some things I sometimes see, including in the V.I.B.E program, but often consistently with entrepreneurs forming a new business venture, is, we will almost always recommend they go work with a business advisor and put together a business plan. In this case, might be through the Urban League and the other resources that you make available to entrepreneurs. But nevertheless, the reason you want to talk to counsel primarily even before you do that is through that business planning process, you're going to be talking about things that will have legal implications in putting together your business plan. And without some fundamental knowledge or understanding of what those implications of those not always apparent legal issues, you can start down the wrong path. So I've had, and this is outside of the V.I.B.E program, I've had people who are starting businesses think that they wanted to go into business or have a certain business partner. And after going through a whole business planning process and then coming back to legal counsel, only engaging legal counsel after the fact, they didn't really understand all the legal implications of having a quote unquote partner. And then they realize after the fact, after they've already made promises to that person, after they've already set a whole business plan as to how they would work together and run the business, they realize that this other person who did have some value to the venture would have been better for the entrepreneur to have as an employee or a consultant and not actually give a piece of the pie to. So that's just one example as to why it's important to talk to legal counsel up front, because there will be things throughout everything you're doing through the business planning process that will have sometimes not apparent legal implications.
I like what you said right there. And I do want to dive back into that a little later in the conversation, because we talk about business relationships quite often through the in-back office. Matthew, Jabari, do you guys have any input on that first question there I pitched out?
I can go ahead and just jump in from a litigation perspective. I think this kind of ties back in well to Janae's point earlier about how the V.I.B.E program is not necessarily targeted towards litigation. And that's because litigation is quite extensive and can go on for an unascertainable period of time. And so that requires a lot of time, money, and resources. And so say, for example, I do labor and employment litigation sometimes, and say that an employer notices a questionable conduct going on in the office, just vaguely. And let's say they ignore it and they wait, and then maybe you have 2, 3, 4+ lawsuits originating from that questionable conduct. Had that employer gone out and actually sought legal counsel, had conversations, figured out a way to modify or augment that conduct, perhaps those 3 or 4 litigation cases, suits would not have occurred, which would have then in turn saved the employer money. And so I think that when, Janae and Bruce and Jeff talk about, finding someone that you can just feel comfortable talking to and being able to reflect, I think that pays a lot of dividends. And, sometimes it doesn't always have to be as financially crippling as I think most people think it may be. Sometimes it's a very brief conversation, and so I think it's much better to consult an attorney or to consult counsel earlier rather than later, just as my colleagues have echoed.
Excellent, thank you.
Yeah, and I would echo everything that my colleagues have said. From the brand protection side, deal with a lot of intellectual property issues. So certain times at the V.I.B.E program, we have somebody that may be interested in a copyright or a trademark. And when you're dealing with those types of issues, you really want to get in touch with counsel as soon as possible. With the invent of the internet, as soon as an entrepreneur has an idea, wants to make a product, a lot of the times people throw it on their Facebook or say, hey, look, I built this in my backyard and take a look at this. You might be infringing on somebody's trademarks, and that person may wind up with a C&D. And by that time, you get to a point where it's kind of scary, and potentially you may be facing down a lawsuit. So the earlier you really get in touch with counsel, the better opportunity you have to get that information to say, hey, you're clear to go ahead with this, or hey, we need to protect this because it's a great idea and we don't want somebody else potentially down the line using your product. So I think that's something that we definitely counsel towards, is reaching out as soon as possible.
That's great. So, I mean, it's a lot of what we also emphasize when you're starting your business, and I'll just take banking, for example, the power of the banking relationship and what it will avail to you when you're trying to figure out, is this a good opportunity for me? Should I take advantage of this? Am I prepared to move in this direction? And your financial advisor is going to be huge in helping you advise on some of those things. But there has to be a relationship established there. You just can't walk into a bank and up to a teller and say, hey, this is what I want to do, and expect, a wealth of information. So, oftentimes in my counseling, I'm going to go from the starting of a business to the ending of my business. When I counsel businesses, I'm asking them, what's the legacy, or what's the purpose of this business? And how do you see yourself ending this business? Is it something that's going to stay in the community? Are you leaving behind a legacy? Are you a serial entrepreneur? Is it something you want to start fast and sell quickly? Or is this a lifestyle business? So, what type of things do you want to really get out of this? Do you agree with that type of business counseling? And how does that factor into any of the conversations you get into when it comes to exiting the business?
Well, I'll leave the exiting the business for the corporate colleagues who are going to get deferred to a lot of the questions here. But I think, Janine, that the question that you asked of what are your goals and what are your intentions, we're asking those too on our initial kind of intake calls with clients. It's a little different. Obviously, because we're talking, what are your legal goals? What are you trying to accomplish by hiring a lawyer? And that's usually one of the first questions we ask is, why did you reach out? What about the program, or what about having an attorney on your team stood out to you? Why was this something you really wanted or thought that you needed? And then hearing from the business what their goals and objectives are, I think drives our conversations that we're having with folks. So Jeff and Bruce are far more qualified than I am to answer the exiting question, but on our intake calls, that's where we start. Every call is trying to figure out what the goals and objectives are of the business owner.
Bruce, I'll go ahead and start if that's okay. Yeah, we need, Janine, that's a great point. We need to know what the end goal is, because from a corporate law structural perspective, we might choose a different legal form depending on what the ultimate goals are. So for instance, a software development company that, if successful, has a higher likelihood of attracting venture capital investment money, we might elect something called a C corporation, or a corporation under state law perspectives, because that is the customary form of legal entity for any entities that receive angel or other venture capital investment funds. And it also leaves open the door most cleanly for a potential IPO. And again, it's, that sounds like it's pie in the sky, but it's never too early to have those conversations about what is this business, what size and scale can it potentially achieve, what are your desires about that. If someone's starting a coffee shop in Columbus, Ohio, they might think initially that they want to have one coffee shop, but you can dig deeper, and could you become, an international organization that has thousands upon thousands of coffee shops? So those understanding what this potential for the business itself and the ultimate objectives of the founder are extremely important, because it will have a ripple effect. What you do today from a legal structural perspective will have a ripple effect and change alternative paths going forward.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I agree completely with what Jeff is saying. And we certainly understand you may not have all the details in terms of the scope of your business and how large it may become. But it is good to have a general sense for the goals and objectives early on. I think two things that come to mind where we can provide advice early in the process that folks may not consider. One is exit strategies and exit rights. You brought up, what the end goal is. Unfortunately, a lot of business owners at the beginning of their venture are very excited and optimistic, and rightly so. And they tend not to focus as much on what if the venture is not successful, or what if I do not get along with my partner, and how can we essentially separate? And to some extent, partnerships can be like marriages, but unfortunately, there isn't a streamlined process in a lot of legal entities for getting out of the relationship. And one common situation we see is early on, two folks come together to form a business, and they say, we just want to be 50-50. Everything is 50-50. And that sounds great. And it probably feels right to structure it that way. But if you don't build in protections, unfortunately, that 50-50 can be paralyzing down the road if the relationship sours. And so one of the things that we point out up front is just be prepared, plan to be successful, but also be prepared for there to be bumps along the way. And we can help through some of our experience elaborate on what those bumps are likely to be, and perhaps how you can address them early on. So I would say point one is not ignoring the downside risks. And a lot of times those come into play with partners. The other area that I think is helpful for to begin with the end in mind, but also to consult with an attorney early on, we can help structure businesses in a way that is relatively simple and cost effective. One thing that we've seen through the V.I.B.E program, as well as through just counseling, clients on a day-to-day business, they may start out overly complicated without necessarily needing the business to be complicated. And that causes a ripple effect. A perfect example would be you start a business and you want to give equity to all your employees, your business partners, and you start trying to come up with essentially option plans or creative solutions to reward folks who are part of your team. The intentions are great, but in a startup business, that can be very, very complicated, and it can have tax effects, it can have securities law effects, corporate law. And so making sure that you're really at that stage where you want to undertake something that is that complicated, I think is important, because it may sound great, and in principle, it certainly is doable, but it may not make sense for where you are just starting out in your business.
Absolutely. And you stole my words. I was going to borrow from Covey also, beginning with the end in mind, but I'm now thinking what you don't know will hurt you when it comes to some of these things, right? Great answers, guys. I'm learning so much. There's a few questions in the chat that I want to pay attention to. Let's see here. Are there any qualifications or eligibility requirements for participating in the V.I.B.E program?
So there are minimal qualifications, that being 51% owned by minority entrepreneurs. We have an intake questionnaire that we ask all businesses who want to participate complete the questionnaire, and largely that's a keeping track of everyone, keeping track of data, and it allows us to run a conflict check like we would with any of our other clients who might reach out for our services. If we have a conflict, and this might go to I think there was a second question about involving folks outside of the Vorys family. If we have a conflict with a particular business for one reason or another, we do try to give people no, we can't help you in this instance, but here's maybe some other lawyers in your area who might be able to help you. Because I hate saying no and leaving someone without a solution. And we're trying to be mindful about who we are using as those referral kind of names to give out. Certainly those folks are not participating in the V.I.B.E program. They're not connected to the V.I.B.E program. But we do see that about half of the businesses, maybe not quite half, we end up having to refer out for one reason or another. Maybe we don't do it as part of the V.I.B.E program, or we have a conflict. And so there is an opportunity, I think, to encourage people, even if we're not the right lawyer or law firm, that you should still have a lawyer on your team, and making sure that we give folks resources and options.
And I love that about any resource program that has a strong referral network where you can find, or recommend the better person to be involved in the project. I want to encourage people to think about legal is my friend. Let's share some success stories that you each may have, just in broad strokes, from being, working with people through the V.I.B.E program you have there.
Well, since I usually go first, I'll let my colleagues jump in and give their success story first.
I want to hear from Matt. He's been really quiet and thoughtful. I think he's pondering a great response there for us.
Sorry, so I was on mute. So actually, Janine, unfortunately, I'm relatively new to the firm. And so I've only been able to support in more of an ancillary role. But I think that some of my other colleagues on the call will be able to talk to you a little bit more about the details of the successes.
That sounds like an answer from an attorney, Matthew.
I've had a number of V.I.B.E clients who we have been able to counsel to form an entity. And I think a lot of what we provide is just reducing the anxiety level and saying, look, you know, here's some of the considerations, but we can help you. It shouldn't be overwhelming, and we can make it as simple as possible. Here's what you need. Here's why you need it. Here's what you can do on your own. Here's what we help you do. Here are the other resources or contacts that you may need as your business grows. So from that perspective, I think we've helped formed a number, 3 or 4 legal entities that I've worked on. But also a lot of what I'll call just general business advice. And where the line bleeds over between legal advice and business advice it's not always clear. So helping a client understand what names they can choose. How do you pick a name for a legal entity? And do you have to worry about infringing on someone else's name is a very common question, or opening a bank account. Mm-hmm. Those are things that we can help early on, and usually instead of causing more anxiety, I'd like to think that we're able to reduce the client's anxiety level, because it's not as complicated as perhaps they may have envisioned. And with our help, it's something we can do relatively quickly.
Excellent.
I see our role as being humble servants. And so I actually am interested to find out through the V.I.B.E representations, how they perceive the value they've derived from working with us. But as Bruce mentioned, you know, we're doing a lot of what we would call blocking and tackling legal advice. It's advice over a phone, via email. It's forming entities. It's preparing the governing documents, what Bruce mentioned about partners, making sure there are protections for both partners. If at some point in the future there's disagreements and they want to unwind the business, you know, to make sure there's a path to be able to do that without ending up in court. We've done trademark investigations and registrations. That was another thing that Jabari had mentioned is, you know, when you go down the path of the very beginning of your business concept, you need to make sure that your vision for the brand is something that you can actually pursue, because that kind of your vision for the brand and what the name will be and what that meaning will be to that brand name and what the logo will be, that's very powerful, particularly with consumer products and consumer services. So we do a lot of that type of work as well, investigation to make sure they're free and clear to be able to go forward with that brand, but also to register it to make sure that no one else uses it in the future, so that they can enter a field, an industry or a sector unencumbered.
So wait, Jeff, wait. You're telling me that just because I search a name on the Secretary of State website and it seems to be clear that there could be a conflict? Is that what you're telling me?
Yes, indeed.
Oh,
yes.
no. Okay.
That's an excellent
I'm glad you
point.
brought that up, because I know that.
Yeah, I can tell that you do. So that's an excellent point. That's you know, kind of a general misunderstanding that if a name is available on the Secretary of State's website, that the ability to use that from all legal perspectives, all legal right perspectives, it's available. So there's this other body of law called trademark law, and when you start a business, you not only want to have your business registered in the state where you're going to be doing business, you also want the ability to sell your products using a brand name. Maybe it's locally, maybe it's statewide, maybe it's regionally, like in the Midwest, maybe it's nationally, maybe it's internationally. And so the registrations in any particular state do not take into account that there could be other companies in other places in the world, in other states in the United States, that could be using that exact same name and logo in the exact same industry and sector, and that they would have legal rights to prohibit you from doing what it is you want to do. And so that's why we do a much different type of search on brand. I just generically call it brand. So we've done commercial contracts for folks. I know we've had some businesses that were already in existence that were operating on handshake. They were doing business with their customers and their vendors on a handshake or on agreements that were put in front of them by the other parties, and they generally did not seek any legal advice to review those. So we were able to prepare and work with them to establish what are called terms and conditions. Mm-hmm. So for instance, if you sell, a product business to business, you can establish the terms and conditions the legal terms and conditions upon which you're willing to sell that product, including what warranties you're making about the product and for how long, and what the consequences are if your product does not meet those warranties. And likewise, in the consumer setting, you have the same implications, but there's this overlay with consumer protection laws, which makes that even more complicated. And then we've worked with clients on those issues, and we've worked with clients on establishing their websites and who is hosting their website and who prepared their website. Do you hold the legal rights to your website and all its content, or did the outside consultant who prepared and is hosting the website for your company, did they somehow put an agreement in front of you that said they actually hold all the legal rights with respect to the content of the website? So every little step of the way, when you're entering into what you believe to be innocuous business relationships, whether by written contract or by handshake or by being pointed to somebody's terms and conditions on their website, you're actually entering into legally binding agreements. So we've worked a lot with V.I.B.E clients around those issues. I think Janae's going to have the most telling, because I think she stays the closest to a lot of these entrepreneurs and kind of sees their future successes. And we only see them when they come back to us for our specific legal niche expertise.
Gotcha.
Yeah, I think great examples have been given. And I think there's just a few that I would add. Probably the most successful, I suppose, in terms of the dollars and cents. We were able to get involved in, a business owner was going to buy a piece of property, and our real estate lawyer who jumped in on the project was able to get involved early enough to identify there's a lot of problems with this property that you're about to buy, a lot of problems you weren't aware of and couldn't be aware of absent having legal counsel. And we were able to get them out of the transaction that they had started to enter into. I think at the end of the day, I would say probably into the six figures, saving this individual kind of a lot of heartache in terms of what they would have to have done to remedy the piece of property, to do what they wanted with it and to develop it in the way that they wanted. I think that's an outlier right now. I mean, that was a huge success in terms of the project that this individual trusted us to help with. The one that I am maybe most excited about, and it's one that Jeff and I are working on together with one of our colleagues, a young 16-year-old entrepreneur came and sent me an email and said, hey, I want to do this right. I want to start a business. I've got a product. I've been selling it kind of through my own social media channels. What do I need to do and how do I do it? I mean, that's just fantastic. I mean, at 16, I was not thinking about that. That was not part of my game plan or life plan. And so I'm incredibly excited. That was not something I anticipated when this program launched, that we might be, working with youth as well. So that's incredibly exciting. We've got a business down in Houston, and we got to see them from kind of beginning to now where they're at, where they've got a product in the market that is just booming. They are a women's fashion company and they make blazers. They are awesome. I own a couple of them. And so I'm a little partial to the business because I think that they've just got a great product and we're going to be seeing them, I think, down the road. And they have just been absolutely fantastic to work with. The business owners are great. And I'm just really excited to see them grow and knowing we played maybe just a tiny, tiny role in getting to them where they needed to be. We actually did a licensing agreement because they wanted to contract with other women artists to put a piece of art in the lining of their blazers. And so we did the licensing agreement to allow that transaction to happen and make sure people were getting paid appropriately and had the rights to use it and then to reproduce it, to put it out for sale. So those are just three that come to mind for me that were incredibly impactful and great projects to work on. But all of our clients have brought us, unique projects and just learning more about the community, learning more about what's going on in the community has been a really, really awesome experience.
Wonderful. That is a great example, Janae. Thank you. We're all still reeling from the effects of the pandemic, right? I know in the in-back office, we saw a huge spike in businesses that are starting, right? In part because people had more time on their hands. I can commit to doing something I've always wanted to do. What types of trends have you seen as a result of the pandemic coming through your V.I.B.E pipeline?
I think you hit it spot on, is people are taking that thing that was their idea, maybe an idea that they've had for a couple of years, and they're putting it to market, right? They are now ready to launch, be it they have more time. Maybe they've realized you might as well go for it while you can. And so we're seeing a lot of folks who are coming that want to start their own business, a lot of folks who are coming and saying, I've been working for X, Y, and Z company for a really long time, and I'm just ready to do my own thing. I'm ready to branch out and see if I can make this happen. Jeff and I were on a call last week with a young man. He's about 22, 23 years old. And he just said, look, it's my time to shine. And he's ready to put what his product is into the market and to get out and do his own thing. So I think we are seeing maybe a little bit more self-confidence. I don't know if that's the right way to describe it, but just a confidence in going forward and taking a little bit of a risk is definitely shown through the program.
Good stuff. I've also started to see, we saw problems with people in commercial leases in the midst of the pandemic, and there's a lot of space that has reopened, so to speak, at shockingly low rates, and some entrepreneurs are chomping at the bit to go after this great space at this price that you just can't believe it. And I'm always like, if it's too good to be true, it might be too good to be true. What type of, advice or information would you share to help someone really kind of think through going into the commercial space at a time such as this? Commercial lease, I should say.
Yeah, I think this is connected to some extent to the prior question in terms of a lot of folks who are forming businesses now are doing so because they're more confident that they can operate virtually and that other businesses are able to operate virtually. So a lot of the V.I.B.E clients we have helped, perhaps connected to the pandemic, have realized that they can in fact get started without a long-term lease or obligation. And so I think the advice would be to look at minimizing your upfront costs, and being tethered to a long-term lease would potentially be one of those things. It may look cheap at the front end, and in fact, it may be, but typically you're going to be obligated for a period of time that may be 3-5 years, and there's significant penalties for not fulfilling your obligations under that lease. So starting small and growing versus taking on more space than you need, I would say would be the advice that we would tend to give, and not to inhibit growth. And obviously people want to plan for growth. But the problem is, if you're really successful, then that still may not be the place you want to be. In fact, it may be too small. So having a better idea of your growth trajectory before you sign a long-term lease, typically makes sense.
Okay. All right. Let's see here. I'm going to go to the chat. There was a couple of questions that I missed. What access to capital issues are included in a foundational legal project?
Go ahead, Jeff. That's all yours.
Well, access, what we will do as part of the process is as we ask questions and collaborate with the clients about what it is their business is, what product or service are they going to provide, how can it be scaled, does the ability to scale match their desires to scale? So all the things, kind of an accumulation of everything we talked to before. What's the end in mind? What's the potential of the business? Does that match the desires of the founder? Then we back into, the business planning aspect, and we ask them, have they been working with a business advisor? And you've got this, what capital is required to start the business? And then, once you get started, is it going to take some capital to get your product into the stream of commerce? Like if you're working with a consumer product, is it ready, to be sold to consumers? Or even if it's B2B, is it a saleable product yet? Are you still in the stage of trying to, envision it and have models built and stuff like that? But at some point, how much capital to take it to market? And then how much overhead and capital do you need to get it into the stream and start selling? And what's going to be your burn rate before you start breaking even? So what's your break even point? All that is stuff that we don't do as lawyers, but we advise them to be working. It's one of the reasons we recommend meeting a CPA early, because they can provide some assistance with that, and obviously some of the tax implications of operating the business, which will affect your cash burn rate. And then secondly, so we'll advise them to be working on those things and how important those are. And then we will also have, we have various referrals that we can make both to local communities that have various types of loan and grant programs for minority-based entrepreneurial ventures. And some of that might be through your organization or urban leagues or other organizations or in other regions of the state or the country. And then, of course, some banks have special programs for startup businesses in general, like the SBA, the Small Business Administration with the federal government, and some states and local governments have similar programs. And I know Janae is often having this conversation as well when we're on mutual phone calls. Janae, did you have anything to add to that?
No, I think that the question of, what types of access to capital programs are included maybe in the V.I.B.E program, a lot of it is at this point, it is referral based out. So it's referral to what resources we have and what resources have been brought to our attention, because not always is the business, at least at this stage of the V.I.B.E program, coming to us with a legal question. Maybe the question is where do I get the money? And we can refer you to places that can answer that question, but the law firm isn't the place you get the money. And so a lot of it is just trying to use resources and make sure people are aware of resources. Now, certainly as the V.I.B.E program grows, maybe it becomes now we're in step 2 or step 3 and a legal service is required to go forward with a project. We just haven't gotten there yet.
Okay, thank you for answering that. And I don't want to leave out, we've kind of focused on product-driven businesses or something tangible. I don't want to leave out the people that may have concerns around intellectual property, those types of things. And I know we touched very briefly on it and Jabari had to hop off, but what are some of the things that a consultant per se may need to have from a legal perspective be concerned about?
Sure. So on the trademark component of it, we have a full team of folks who are set up and ready to go of looking and doing trademark searches, making sure names or products or even in the consulting space, that their idea or how they're going to bring to market that business opportunity. They are all set up to both do the search. And I'll note one thing, since we said at the outset, a lot of the V.I.B.E work is complementary. The attorney work is complementary, but when you're doing something like a trademark application, and even if you're filing, say, the LLC paperwork, there is a cost associated with that. And that's a cost that we as the lawyers cannot take on. So I just always want to be really transparent about that when we start talking in the trademark space, that there is a filing fee for the application that we do have to pass along to the business owners. But it really is for those projects, it's about getting them connected to one of the folks who specializes in that area. They'll run the trademark search, and then they will ultimately, if they can, file the application and move forward. Those projects do take a little bit more time, maybe, than the ones that we've talked about so far of basic kind of contract drafting. It's not an overnight process. The application is not terribly difficult. It just takes time for it to get processed and hopefully approved. So the folks that have come into the V.I.B.E program, we've got a couple of consultants who are working with our trademark folks, and then some of the more traditional product-based services. They're kind of sitting in a holding pattern, right? They're the files that have been open a lot longer because we're just waiting to see if those applications get approved.
Okay, great. Well, our time is almost up here, and I just want to go round robin and see if there was a question I should have asked that I didn't, that you were really anxious to share during our time block today. So anything from you, Jeff, that you wanted to share or focus on that I didn't touch on in the questions?
Well, you did a wonderful job. So first, thank you for hosting this today. This is obviously very important to each of us at the Vorys law firm and to the firm overall. I've been so amazed at the level of entrepreneurialism and creativity coming out of each community in which we do business. One of the consistent themes, and this isn't just in V.I.B.E, but with entrepreneurs in general, people that have generally been employees their whole lives, they are so nice and accommodating that they also, not only in learning to talk business and you know how to do a business plan, and they learn about LLCs and corporations, and they learn about C Corps and S Corps and all the legal stuff, trademarks, and terms and conditions, T's and C's. And I heard Jabari say C&D, that's a cease and desist letter. One of the fundamental things that people need training on, they need to think about, is how do you negotiate in the business world? And I'm actually going to do a commercial. So I'm 54 years old. I was in business before I went to law school. I've been practicing law for over 20 years, and I still don't have it right. But people that are starting businesses need to learn how to negotiate without burning bridges. And that means you can't be nice, you can't compromise, you can't be too accommodating, but you need to be able to learn to influence people without them feeling pressured, and be able to say no without people thinking you're saying no. And it all deals with something called transactional empathy, that in any given business negotiations or legal negotiations, you need to build empathy with the party on the other side for the purpose of getting the best business deal possible with you, so that they trust you as quickly and as much as possible in that situation. I'm going to hold this book up. I don't know if you can see it, but I'll read it. It's called Never Split the Difference, Negotiating as If Your Life Depended on It. It's by the author Christopher Voss. It's transformational, and it's all about building that transactional empathy and trust in a business negotiation or legal negotiation setting as quickly as possible, so that you can influence people and get what it is you really want without them taking advantage of you. And that's the one thing that I see that most of the entrepreneurs, need to focus on, because we want them to get great business and legal deals for themselves. They've earned it, they're entitled to it, and they should get them.
Excellent. Thank you for that. And you actually make me think that that's something else we can offer on our resource pages, is a library of books for entrepreneurs. So I'm definitely a reader, and I will put that on my next Amazon order. Thank you. Appreciate that. Anyone else? What did I miss? What do you want people to know?
I don't think you missed anything. I think this was a great high level overview of how to use attorneys and what sorts of advice and information we could provide. I guess I wanted to comment in terms of my experience with the V.I.B.E program, how amazed I've been with the energy of the entrepreneurs, but also the social activism. A lot of advice that we have provided has involved, well, how do I give back? Can I be a nonprofit? Can I donate goods or services? And if so, how do I do that in the most effective way from a tax perspective or legal? And so I feel like as attorneys, we have an opportunity to learn a lot by virtue of our clients and the V.I.B.E folks that we've worked with. I've been thankful that they have changed our perspective, because a lot of times we're working with large organizations that are somewhat bureaucratic, and the energy level, the questions, and just the fact that they care so much about their business, but also their partners, their employees, and the community it's been very rewarding.
I agree. I love being in this space. We get to meet people on the best days of their lives, right? I want to start a business. I'm growing my business, just phenomenal activity. And you bring up a really good point. The social enterprise question comes out frequently for us in terms of how do I do good for the community? So excellent catch on that, Bruce. Anyone else as we wrap up?
I'll just throw something out there. As I mentioned before, Janine, I am a more junior in comparison to my colleagues as I recently joined the firm. And so my experiences with the V.I.B.E program are limited by comparison. But at the same time, one of the things I think is fundamental that does apply is just this concept of making the ask. Sometimes there's an element, I think, with businesses or with people when it comes down to legal representation where they don't know if they should be seeking legal representation. And then I think other times there's a question of, can I seek legal representation? I think that concept of the ask is made a lot easier when you have a platform, people who are willing to engage with you or who are focused on helping and serving you. And so that is the primary impetus of the V.I.B.E program. As Janae indicated earlier, that one of the prerequisites for joining the program is that the business is 51% minority owned. And so I know from my experiences that a lot of people involved in the V.I.B.E program are very interested in serving communities of color because of the history of underrepresentation and because of the disadvantages that the communities of color have faced. And so I think that when we come around back to that concept of making the ask, just feeling comfortable doing that, reaching out like those people did with Janae, like the 16-year-old did, that's incredibly important because that opens up doors. And I would just encourage anybody who's listening, anybody who's wondering, whether or not they are concerned or whether or not they have that insecurity, please do reach out and please do make contact because you never know where these things can go. And so that's just my 2 cents over here.
I love it, Matthew. And conversations like this is about breaking down those institutional barriers, right? We need to take our passion, our power, our energy, and not be shy, be able to negotiate those conversations intelligently, efficiently, so that we can get to the end that we have in mind. So that's just fantastic. You kind of took my thunder there a little bit, Matthew. So you spoke the least, but it was the most important piece. I appreciate it. Janae, I'm going to let you have a few wrap-up comments. And I just want to thank you all in advance. This has been phenomenal. I think this will be something that we will do again as often as we need to make sure that we're getting in front of our audience as much as possible with this type of rich information. Janae, do you have any parting comments for us?
I would just say thank you. Thank you for having us, and thank you for inviting us and trusting us to occupy this space with you all. We are very appreciative of that, and we are incredibly excited to see where the V.I.B.E program ends up.
Awesome. Well, thank you again for your time, and for my audience and participants, I appreciate your attention. Questions that you put through the chat were phenomenal. Any further needs, reach out to MBAC. We are your resource connector. We are finding other rich resources to send you to so that you can get your questions answered and know that we have your back. We are here for you. And I look forward to seeing you again on our next webinar session next week. Thank you and have a great holiday weekend, everybody. Bye-bye.
Thank you.